The voice cut like glass through the quiet cabin. "Your seat, not here. You don't belong here." Heads turned. Passengers froze mid-step. A white flight attendant stood, finger pointed at Danielle Johnson as though she were an intruder, not a paying passenger. Danielle blinked, clutching her boarding pass. "This is my seat. Right here, 14C. The woman's lips curled. "Don't argue. People like you always make things difficult." The words sank like lead. The casual venom, laced with racism, stung louder than the accusation itself. A murmur rippled through the row. Phones slid into palms. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Danielle tried to steady her breath. This flight wasn't about comfort. It was about survival, a new job, a new start, a chance to give her daughter everything she'd dreamed of. But instead of respect, she was standing trial in front of strangers. The attendant leaned in, voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. "Either you move, or I'll make sure security moves you." Danielle's chest tightened, but her voice held steady. "I have every right to sit here." The silence that followed was deafening. Passengers leaned in, waiting. Phones kept recording. The question hung in the air like smoke. What would happen next? A man in the aisle seat coughed nervously, shifting as if guilt might splash onto him. A young woman near the window whispered to her friend. "She didn't do anything." Still, neither spoke louder than a breath. Click. Another phone lit up. Click. Another angle. The scandal was now content, lives reduced to views. Danielle's pulse raced, every eye on her, every whisper slicing at her dignity. She wanted to disappear, but pride held her upright. Her daughter's voice echoed in her mind. "Mama, one day you'll fly and bring me back stories." The attendant crossed her arms. "Well, are you moving or not?" Someone in the back muttered, "This isn't right." But their courage wilted, swallowed by the collective hush. The silence was worse than the words. Silence meant agreement. Silence meant betrayal. Danielle's fingers trembled around her boarding pass, crumpling the edges. This wasn't just a seat. This was her right, her dignity, her place in the world. And they were trying to strip it away in public. But the question gnawed at her. If no one would speak for her, could she keep standing alone? She didn't move. She couldn't. Her legs locked, body rooted like stone. Passengers watched as though she were on display, a woman marked by the crime of simply existing in the wrong skin, in the wrong space. Her bag slipped from her shoulder, thudding against the floor. The sound cracked the silence, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, her voice wavered. "I have my ticket." "I belong here," the attendant sneered. Aggressive, just like I thought. Aggressive. For standing? For speaking? Danielle's eyes burned. Every humiliation she'd swallowed in life piled onto this moment. Teachers doubting her, bosses overlooking her, strangers clutching purses tighter in elevators. Now this, her humanity questioned in front of hundreds. A man in the row ahead muttered, "Come on, just sit somewhere else." Another hissed, "Always an issue." Their words wrapped around her like chains, each one pressing her deeper into isolation. Her daughter's drawing pressed against her chest through her bag. Planes, stars, a promise. She whispered to herself, "Just make it through." But even she knew, making it through was no longer enough. The attendant stepped closer, blocking the aisle with her body. "Last chance. Move, or security will drag you off. Your choice." Danielle's throat tightened. The threat wasn't subtle. It was a performance, a declaration that her defiance was a danger. Passengers shifted, nervous. Not for her, but for the delay. A sigh escaped from the back. "We don't have time for this." Another voice. "Why's she making a scene?" Danielle's breath hitched. Making a scene? She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't cursed, hadn't resisted. Her only act of rebellion was existing. The attendant leaned down, her whisper laced with venom. "Don't cause trouble, or you'll regret it." Trouble. The word branded her, weaponized against her. Trouble was what society always told her she was. Danielle's heart pounded. She had dreamed of this flight as freedom, yet here she stood, cornered, stripped, accused of crimes she never committed, and still no one rose to defend her. Not yet. Danielle lifted her chin, her eyes locking onto the attendants. Neither spoke. The stare carried everything words couldn't. Danielle's refusal to break. The attendant's hunger to win. Her silence wasn't a weakness. It was on fire. And for the first time, the attendant blinked. The cabin was suffocating with tension. Some passengers glanced away, ashamed. Others leaned in closer, waiting for the explosion they thought inevitable. But Danielle only stood taller. If they wanted her silence, she would wield it like a weapon. The question lingered like static. Who would break first? It wasn't Danielle. 2 security officers appeared, summoned like shadows. They flanked her, hands hovering too close. The attendant smirked, victory dripping from her eyes. Danielle's legs moved on command, not will. Each step down the aisle felt like a lifetime. A few passengers clapped. Others bowed their heads in shame. Tears streaked down her face, hot with humiliation, burning with injustice. Phones followed her exit. Whispers chased her down. The door closed behind her, but what came next would make the entire plane wish they'd spoken up. "Mama, one day you'll fly too." Her daughter's little voice still echoed in Danielle's ears. The girl had been drawing airplanes on scrap paper, crayons smudged across the kitchen table. She looked up with wide, hopeful eyes, as if her mother could reach the clouds just by believing. Danielle smiled that day, but behind the smile was exhaustion. Bones aching from another overnight shift. Uniform still smelling faintly of antiseptic. Yet in that moment, hope felt real. Her daughter's tiny hand had pressed the paper plane into hers, as if passing a mission. Don't give up. She folded the paper gently, slipping it into her bag, promising herself she would carry it always. That single drawing became her anchor. Proof that her sacrifices weren't invisible. Proof that no matter how cruel the world could be, her child believed she was unstoppable. But dreams cost more than crayons, and the road to that airplane seat was carved out of sacrifice. Danielle worked days in the hospital, nights in a care home. Every dollar stretched until it tore. Rent, school supplies, groceries, and always the savings jar tucked in the back of the cabinet. "Mama, why don't you ever sleep?" her daughter once whispered. Danielle had just laughed softly, brushing the child's hair from her face. "Because I'm awake building tomorrow." That tomorrow came at the price of her health. Her feet blistered, her back screamed, but she never complained. She saved quietly, refusing to let hardship win. Every coin dropped in that jar was a step closer to this moment, the flight that could change everything. Yet she never let her daughter see the weight of it. To the child, Mama was unbreakable. But Danielle knew this trip wasn't about luxury. It was about survival. The plane ticket wasn't for escape. It was for opportunity. Danielle had earned an interview across the country, a position that promised stability, enough to move her daughter into a safer neighborhood, enough to finally exhale without counting pennies. This was her chance to rewrite the story, to silence the nights of worry, to prove to herself and her child that struggle wasn't permanent. She clutched the boarding pass like it was a lifeline, because it was. Missing this flight didn't just mean inconvenience. It meant the door could slam shut forever, and somewhere deep down, she feared the world would find a way to remind her she wasn't meant to have it. At the gate, Danielle noticed it. A stare. Cold, sharp, unblinking. The flight attendant scanned her ticket with a polite smile that didn't reach the eyes. For a second, Danielle brushed it off. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was overthinking. But something in that gaze felt heavy, like a warning she couldn't quite name. She pushed it down, adjusting her bag and stepping forward. After all, she told herself, dignity was armor. But as she walked toward the plane, she felt it again, that glare burning into her back. A silent question lingering in the air, unspoken but clear. Do you really belong here? She had no idea just how far that question was about to go. "Ticket, please." Danielle handed it over, relieved. But before she could take a step, the flight attendant's sigh cut through the line. Again! Danielle froze. The people behind her shuffled impatiently as the attendant scanned the ticket once more, eyebrows raised like Danielle was trying to sneak onto the flight. "Everything seems fine," the woman muttered, but not without a sharp glance. Then came the whisper under her breath, meant to sting, but not loud enough for others to call out, "Always something with people like this." Danielle's chest tightened. She caught the warmth in the attendant's voice as the next passenger walked up. Cheerful, welcoming, easy. But with her, suspicion, contempt. The difference was clear. And worse, everyone else seemed to notice, but no one dared to say a word. She clutched her bag tighter, telling herself to move forward. But the humiliation already clung to her skin like smoke, impossible to shake. She had no idea this was just the beginning. "Ma'am, that bag's too large. You'll have to check it." Danielle blinked. Her carry-on was smaller than half the luggage she'd seen roll past unchecked. A man behind her wheeled a suitcase twice the size, strolling past without a word from the attendant. "But it fits the requirements," Danielle said carefully, keeping her voice steady. The attendant's eyes narrowed. "Do you want to board or do you want to argue?" Passengers behind her muttered, some annoyed at the delay, others whispering stereotypes with casual cruelty. "Figures," one voice said. Another scoffed, "Always holding things up." Her cheeks burned. She wanted to fight, but the stakes were too high. With trembling hands, she surrendered her bag, watching it disappear down the conveyor. Inside was her daughter's drawing, the one she always carried for strength. The loss felt symbolic, like they were already stripping away her dignity piece by piece, and the whispers kept coming. As Danielle moved forward, she caught fragments of conversations that cut sharper then. "Knives. She doesn't look like she belongs up here." "Probably. Can't even afford that seat." "Some people just always find trouble." Each word was a dart, meant to pierce without leaving a visible wound. She kept her chin high, but her body betrayed her, fingers clenched, breath shallow, heart racing. She wanted to disappear, but the line offered no escape. Her silence wasn't a weakness. It was survival. Every second, she reminded herself, get on the plane. Get to the interview. Everything depends on this. But even before sitting down, the weight of judgment had already settled on her shoulders, and she could feel more coming. Finally sliding into her seat, Danielle exhaled, but it wasn't relief. The air around her felt charged, thick with unspoken tension. She tucked her hands into her lap, repeating silently, "Just make it through. Just make it through." But each shuffle, each glance from nearby passengers carried something extra. Distrust, discomfort. Like her very presence disturbed the order of things. She thought of her daughter, of the promise she made to fight for a future brighter than this. But how do you fight what hides in whispers, in stares, in the silent approval of injustice? Her pulse steadied, but her nerves didn't. And then the shadow of the same attendant loomed again. That was when the warning came. The flight attendant leaned in close, voice low enough to sound private, but sharp enough to slice through her composure. "Don't cause trouble on this flight." Danielle's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. "Excuse me?" The woman's smile was icy, practiced. "Just making sure we understand each other." It wasn't about rules. It was about control. A quiet threat disguised as professionalism. Danielle's body stiffened. Her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the words refused to form, because deep down she knew. This wasn't random. This was targeted. And it was only the start of something far worse. "Ma'am, that seat isn't yours!" The words echoed through the cabin, louder than necessary, sharp enough to slice the air. Danielle froze, her boarding pass still in hand. "Yes, it is," she replied, steady but calm, pointing to the printed seat number. The flight attendant's lips curled into a smirk. "Not today. You'll need to move to the back." A ripple ran through the rows around her. Passengers glanced up, some curious, others annoyed. Danielle's face flushed, but she refused to shrink. "This is my assigned seat." "You scanned my ticket." The attendant leaned closer, voice dripping with authority. "Either move, or we'll have a problem." Danielle's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "I've done nothing wrong." A hush spread across the cabin, the tension thick enough to choke on. And for the first time, Danielle realized this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, but she didn't yet know how far it would go. The attendant's patience snapped like a brittle thread. "People like you are always the problem." The words rang out, filling the aircraft with venom. Passengers gasped. A phone tilted upward to record. Someone whispered, "Did she just say that?" Danielle's heart pounded, but she held her ground. "Excuse me? People like me?" The attendant's chin lifted, eyes blazing. "Exactly. Always arguing. Always making it harder for everyone else. Do you want me to call security right now?" Danielle's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a moment, silence ruled. And in that silence, racism had revealed itself without disguise. Blatant, undeniable, impossible to misinterpret. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, others stared at their shoes. But the sting of those words lingered in the air, impossible to escape, and Danielle knew. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. She scanned the faces around her, desperate for someone, anyone, to speak up. A young man whispered, "This isn't right," but his voice was barely above a murmur. A woman in the aisle clutched her phone tighter, recording but saying nothing. Most passengers chose silence, eyes glued to tray tables or glowing screens. Danielle felt the isolation swallow her. Racism didn't always roar. Sometimes it thrived in whispers and silence. Finally, one passenger spoke louder, trembling with courage. She showed her ticket. "That's her seat," but the attendant spun around, voice booming. "Sir, sit down or you'll be removed too." The man shrank back into his chair, head lowered in defeat. Danielle stood alone again, surrounded by eyes that pretended not to see. And that was when the labels began. "Calm down, ma'am. You're being aggressive." Danielle blinked in disbelief. Aggressive? Her voice had been measured, her movements restrained. She hadn't shouted, hadn't even raised her hands. "I'm not aggressive," she said firmly, though her throat tightened. But the attendant's words carried weight, twisting perception. A few passengers exchanged wary looks, buying into the lie. The narrative had shifted. Danielle wasn't a victim anymore. She was being painted as the threat. She felt the trap closing. The more she defended herself, the more dangerous she appeared. It wasn't just humiliation. It was erased. Her dignity was being rewritten before their eyes. And then the final blow came. "Security will meet you at the front. Gather your things." The words dropped like a hammer. Danielle's knees weakened. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. "I've done nothing wrong," but it didn't matter. Two staff members appeared, gesturing for her to move. Her feet felt heavy as she shuffled down the aisle, tears streaming unchecked. Phones followed her every step. A mother shielded her child's eyes. A man muttered, "Good riddance." It felt like a walk of shame, a public execution of her dignity. Danielle hugged her bag close, as though it could shield her from the judgment pressing in from every side. And with every step, she wondered, would anyone remember her humanity once she was gone? The jet bridge swallowed her figure, but the cabin remained tense, buzzing with aftershocks. Some passengers clapped, as though justice had been served. Others bowed their heads in quiet shame, guilt prickling their skin, and then from the back a woman's voice cut through the noise. "This is America." The words weren't shouted. They whispered, almost mournful. Yet they landed heavier than any cheer, heavier than any silence, because everyone knew they were true. Just when it seemed final, the overhead chime pierced the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice boomed, steady but sharp, "this flight will be delayed indefinitely." Passengers exchanged confused glances. Phones rose again. Whispers spread. Something had shifted, and Danielle's story wasn't over yet. If you saw someone humiliated like this, would you speak up or stay silent? "She's the technician." The shout erupted from row 12, cutting through the uneasy silence. Heads turned, necks craned. A middle-aged man in a navy blazer stood, pointing at Danielle. "That woman you just threw off? She's not just a passenger. She's the FAA-certified ground technician who cleared this very plane for departure." Gasps scattered across the cabin. Whispers ignited like sparks in dry grass. Danielle froze at the jet bridge, her tear-stained face visible through the small window. The man's voice grew louder. You don't understand that without her, this aircraft doesn't move an inch. Federal law. You think you can humiliate her, replace her, and still take off? The weight of his words rippled outward. Some passengers fumbled for their phones, others leaned forward, curiosity burning. Another voice chimed in from the back. Wait, she's the one who did the safety checks? Yes, the man barked. She's the reason this plane is even on the runway right now. And you all just watched them treat her like a criminal. The murmurs turned to outrage, and for the first time, the power in the cabin shifted. The news spread row by row fast as wildfire. They can't leave without her. She's the technician. FAA rules, no clearance, no takeoff. Passengers exchanged startled looks. Some who had clapped minutes earlier now fidgeted uncomfortably. The woman who whispered, "This is America," folded her arms tighter, her words confirmed in real time. Someone near the front scoffed, "So what now? Do we just sit here because of one person?" "Yes," another snapped back. "Because that one person is the reason we're alive at 30,000 feet. The reality began to sink in. Danielle hadn't just been a victim of racism and humiliation. She was the very backbone of their safety. The same voices that once whispered in judgment now buzzed with unease. The plane could not, would not, leave the ground without her. And suddenly, silence shifted to a new kind of tension. Panic. The flight attendant's bravado cracked. Her cheeks drained of color, her posture stiff. "What? What do you mean?" she stammered, forcing a smile that fooled no one. "She's just a passenger." The man from row 12 shot back. "No, she's the licensed technician assigned to this aircraft. And you just dragged her off like she was a threat." Passengers' eyes narrowed, some shaking their heads, others muttering under their breath. Phones stayed raised, recording every twitch of the attendant's nervous hands. Her confident voice faltered. I didn't know, but ignorance was no shield now. The facade of control had slipped, and every passenger could see the fear blooming in her eyes. Outside the jet bridge, Danielle wiped her face with the back of her hand. Her breath still trembled, but her resolve began to harden. She clutched her phone, scrolling to the email with her FAA assignment. Attached was the safety report she'd filed hours earlier. Her proof, her power. Her thumb hovered over the dial screen, ready to call her supervisor. For the first time since the ordeal began, Danielle realized she wasn't powerless. The very system that had tried to silence her now depended on her, and she wasn't about to let them forget it. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and let the air fill her lungs. Two paths unfolded before her: walk away quietly, let the injustice fade into another unrecorded story. Or turn, face the people who mocked her, and stand taller than the prejudice that tried to break her. Her grip on the phone tightened. The words of the man in row 12 echoed in her mind. "She's the reason we're alive." Danielle opened her eyes. Her decision was clear, but when she stepped back through that jet bridge, no one could have predicted what would happen next. "Stop the boarding process!" Danielle's voice rang out, steady and unshaken. Every head in the gate area turned as she stepped forward, badge in hand. No longer the tear-streaked passenger they dismissed. She was now the FAA authority their flight depended on. Her tone was calm, but carried steel. "This aircraft will not leave the ground until I say it's safe. And right now, it's not." The murmurs rolled into silence. The very crew that sneered at her minutes earlier now froze, realizing the balance of power had flipped. She wasn't asking for respect anymore. She was demanding it. The airline supervisor barreled down the jet bridge, tie askew, face flushed with panic. He nearly tripped in his rush to reach her. "Ms. Johnson," he gasped, voice trembling. We weren't aware of your position. Please, let's talk." Danielle didn't flinch. "You were aware enough to humiliate me in front of 100 passengers. Now you'll be aware of the consequences." Sweat pooled at his temples. For the first time, the airline's authority bent under hers. From their seats, passengers pressed against the windows watching history unfold. The same woman they once saw as powerless now stood unmovable, her voice calm, her words precise. "Federal compliance has been breached," she announced. "I will be filing a full report." The arrogant attendant who once mocked her was quietly pulled aside, eyes downcast, lips trembling. A few passengers whispered, "She deserves this," while others simply stared, realizing they had witnessed discrimination unravel in real time. The power shift was undeniable. Danielle raised her hand, silencing the room. "This aircraft is officially grounded. It will not fly until further notice." Her words cut deeper than any insult hurled at her before. The crew stiffened. The passengers gasped. The very plane that was supposed to carry them forward now sat frozen because of the prejudice shown to one woman. The attendant's final sliver of authority evaporated. The badge in Danielle's hand carried more weight than her accuser's entire uniform. Justice didn't whisper this time. It thundered. Danielle didn't smile. She didn't need to. She stood tall, head lifted, shoulders strong. The same crowd that watched her humiliation now witnessed her vindication. Not a word left her lips. Yet her silence screamed louder than any defense ever could, because this time, she didn't just walk away with her dignity. She left with the truth, and the world watching, and what happened next. No one was prepared for. "Mommy, one day you'll fly." Those words echoed in Danielle's chest as she walked through the terminal, back straight, heart steady. Her daughter's crayon drawing pressed against her palm, a reminder of the reason she endured humiliation but refused defeat. Each step carried the weight of injustice, yet also the light of resilience. She wasn't just walking away from a plane that tried to strip her dignity. She was walking toward a future her little girl would one day inherit. And nothing, not even open racism, could take that away. The narrator's voice rose, sharp yet tender. Discrimination may try to brand you. Prejudice may try to shrink you. But hear this. Your worth isn't theirs to define. No insult, no slur, no dismissal can erase the truth of who you are. Strength isn't in how they treat you. It's in how you refuse to bow. Now the story turns to you. If you were in that cabin, would you have raised your voice? Would you have defended her? Or would you have turned your eyes away, pretending not to see? In moments of injustice, silence isn't neutral. It's a choice. So, which one would you have made? If Danielle's story shook you, don't let it end here. Share it. Let more people see the raw reality of racism and the unshakable power of resilience.